Well, the federal government, along with the state, do have important roles. The federal government's primary role is where there's interstate commerce involved, and making sure we have the most up-to-date equipment for air traffic controlling, for example. Our ports are interstate, international commerce. We're blessed in Virginia with really an outstanding port for not only our Navy, but for commerce. A role that I played when I was in the Senate was the Heartland Corridor, to make sure there's better connections between our port and the Midwest, so that we're more attractive for ship visits in Virginia, and using rail, double stacking rail trains to get to Columbus and the Midwest, and particularly Chicago as well. The roads are important as well. I'm one who's always been an advocate of Virginia getting its fair share, a better share of federal highway dollars. When I was governor also, we expanded the transportation pie by allowing the private sector to be involved with Public-Private Transportation Act opportunities. Right now, for example, in Northern Virginia, the hot lanes are being built using that. On Interstate 95 out of Northern Virginia to Stafford, there's other hot lanes that are going to be built. I've been an advocate for funding for Dulles Rail to Dulles, although that ought to be done without project labor agreements that the union bosses like to have, which are prejudicial against non-union workers. The other thing in transportation the federal role could be more helpful in is that the permitting takes so long. Instead of 7 years, it ought to get all done in 3 years. The other thing is any federal project requires what are called these Davis-Bacon wages, which add 22% on average to the labor costs of a project. So instead of 7 miles of road being resurfaced, you get 5 miles. And so I want to make sure the taxpayers are getting the best bang for the buck with a much more efficient approach, with less burdensome regulations, have better competitive bidding, do not discriminate against non-unionized or ununionized workers. And the other thing that will be a real benefit for roads and transportation is the first bill I would introduce as a United States Senator, and that is to allow us in Virginia to produce oil and gas off our coast, and then we would get 37.5% of the royalties, and I want to use those for roads and transportation. That can be hundreds of millions of dollars a year to improve our transportation and roads in Virginia, while also creating the jobs for exploring and producing oil and gas off our coast.